what I love about the work that you're doing is that you've been talking about this intersection and this of innovation in this world of AI that we're in. What's keeping you not only enthusiastic about this space that we're in, but also motivated to just share this message with audiences all over the world?
I think it has a power to turn the questions we ask it back on us in a really beautiful way that reinvigorates our natural human curiosity.
And that extends our human condition, doesn't necessarily replace it.
If we don't change the way we think and invite new ways of thinking, that comfort zone becomes a danger zone.
You actually do have much more power today than you probably did 5, 10, 15 years ago because we're engaging in this new digital age that is much more democratized.
It gives us dots to connect in just the exponential scale that helps us shift and look at things from perspectives that never occurred to us.
Well, welcome back to the Future Human Experience. I am so excited for our guest today, Carla Johnson. Welcome to the Future Human Experience.
Thanks. I've been looking forward to this, Eric.
I know it's been several times that we've spoken about not only the work that you've been leading, but your passion around the innovation space. And so that's why I just thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely.
With that said, Carla, let's start talking about a little bit more about not only the journey you're on, but what I love about the work that you're doing is that you've been talking about this intersection and this of innovation in this world of AI that we're in. What's keeping you not only enthusiastic about this space that we're in, but also motivated to just share this message with audiences all over the world?
You know, I think what drives my interest and passion of this is my kids and the whole educational system. And like I think as a parent back to when my kids first started to go to kindergarten and it was very, I live in Denver, and it was very rote and routine and like this is the way we do things. And I'm a history major, like that's my background. And so when I think back on this, it started more than a century ago, you know, with the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden, I mean, we needed standardization. And so if we needed standardization in business, then if you start to look at what gets reverse engineered, then universities need to standardize things so they produce graduates that can work in that environment. And then high schools have to prep the kids for universities and middle schools. You know, you go back to here we are in preschool and there's standardization. It's like, wait, kids are supposed to not be standard thinkers. Like it's just our nature to be curious and imaginative and all of these things. And so now as we look at moving into that AI world and people talk about, you know, the robots are going to take over things. I'm like, well, you know, maybe some things, but I still have this incredible hope and optimism, I think, and really strong belief that AI isn't only about standardization. And that if anything, it can help us break free of that standardization that the Industrial Revolution created, because I think it has a power to turn the questions we ask it back on us in a really beautiful way that reinvigorates our natural human curiosity. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about it in that way. I mean, it is more about efficiency and productivity, which is a wonderful outcome of it, but I don't think it's the only outcome.
Yeah. No, and I love not only the message that you've been bringing to life in your talks, but also how you've been asking all of us to rethink, right? How we not only organize ourselves in our corporations or in our small businesses, but also you've also been asking audiences to unlock a really interesting superpower that we all have, right? That in this world that's moving super fast, one of the things that a common friend of ours has, Sterling Hawking says, he says, the slowest rate of change you're ever gonna feel is today. But you've been asking audiences to lean in and be much more curious and have this fascinating 3-step process that you help audiences navigate that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and give us some insight on it?
Yeah, and that kind of started with kids also, because, you know, kids are curious about everything. You know, I remember walking my kids to the bus stop and it's like, you can't be, like, we don't have time for you to be curious about everything. You know, and I just always wished that adults could be more curious, like have that space and that encouragement, because I think it makes us look at our work completely differently. And we feel different when we wake up on a Monday morning, especially right after the time change. You know, like we have something to look forward to. And I think it's the playfulness and the joy that comes with curiosity. But I'm also a realist that we have to get work done. And so you can't have that unstructured, infinite amount of curiosity from childhood and expect to apply that in adulthood and get work done and run a company. So how do we take the best of that curiosity as a child and that need for efficiency and productivity as an adult? And that's what I call applied curiosity. So we can look at what lanes make sense to be curious in, and then how do we figure out a structured way to apply it to the work that we do so it doesn't feel like time wasted or space wasted. And when I look at the best and most curious people, I find that they have a couple of common characteristics. One is they don't jump into the answer right away. They take the time to sit with the problem. And interestingly, like this can feel from a business perspective like a waste of time and inefficient, but a lot of times companies have done the wrong thing because they didn't take the time to truly understand the problem, or they didn't go to that most curious and creative and innovative place because they didn't spend the time really understanding the problem. So that's the first one, is just to sit with the problem and look at it from all directions and only ask questions. Don't look for answers. And it gives us an entirely different perspective on what we look at. And then the next one is, if you think about Alice in Wonderland, let's go down the rabbit hole. And I just happened to have a call with a company that I worked with last fall and taught them this applied curiosity methodology. And she said the one thing that she consistently hears in meetings now is, well, let's go down the rabbit hole on this. And you think about, historically, how many times have you been in meetings where they say, well, let's not go down the rabbit hole. Let's pull things back together, like let's keep it focused. And that constant focus on focus and efficiency is another way that we cut off that source, that fuel of curiosity, which brings the creativity and the innovation to everything that we do.
Well, Carla, just real quick, if we dive into that, let's go down that rabbit hole. Is that because we probably go into these meetings or going into these conversations around how we're going to solve certain problems already partly with a preconceived notion of how we're going to solve it?
A preconceived notion and also a deadline. And deadlines cut off any opportunity to go down the rabbit hole because, if we haven't sat with the problem and really understood it first, we don't understand the need to go down the rabbit hole and look at possible ways to address it, to solve the problem, to build that relationship with the customer, to look at how we can increase that sales revenue. And those are things, if we stop at the first answer, how many times has the first answer ever been the best answer? So we settle for good enough instead of getting curious for what could possibly be. And I think that shift into what could possibly be is what really takes curiosity as a fuel for that creativity and that innovative thinking.
And also the possible repercussions of that, right? If we just settle with good enough, imagine the second, third order effects of not going in a little bit deeper, not sitting in the problem just a little bit longer, that the direction of where my company, where my business, or where the strategy could have gone to is massively different simply because I just didn't take those two first steps.
And I think it's also that excitement and that passion around it and that playfulness and all of that shifts the whole dynamic of what people believe is possible and what they want to get behind and support. Yeah. And I think the more we can bring that to the work that we do, the more excitement that I think comes with it. And then the third one kind of also plays in and supports this playfulness is to swap hats. So I do this with companies that I work for. It's like, okay, when you were a little kid, what did you want to be? Like when you were a little kid, Eric, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I want to be a paleontologist.
A paleontologist, yes, there you go. So if you think about, you come to work today and you're not someone who focuses on like human-centered, business and how it's done, but you come to work and you think, I'm a paleontologist. Like, what would a paleontologist have for breakfast? How would a paleontologist dress? What would a paleontologist think about all this? It shifts everything entirely. And it breaks us out of this habitual way of thinking that's probably efficient, but not creative and I think about how fast the rate of change, like Sterling Hawkins talks about, like this is the slowest it'll ever go. We have to think different. But a lot of times we just default to what we normally do out of habit. And it's one of the biggest roadblocks that I see that companies struggle with dealing with all of this change that we're in. Because CEOs say, like, everything is changing. My biggest problem is having an employee base that can keep up with that change and take advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah, and the CEOs and the leaders could feel that they're being left behind, or could be like, hey, my competition is going this way. But you've given us 3 practical steps that we could do, either how, in a business that's extremely large, worldwide, global, or a small business that's focused on a local community, but it's still being impacted by disruption. With that said, Carla, do you have any insights on how certain companies have used this? Again, you don't have to share the customer names, but what are some stories that you're like, man, I am so glad that I was part of their journey that impacted how they just were thinking about things a little bit differently, and they were able to implement that change in how they do their work today?
I think my favorite stories come from sales teams with this, because I think sales teams, of course, are numbers driven, but the questions that they tend to ask customers or prospects aren't necessarily curious. They're questions that lead to a product use generally. Like so they know how the product will be used, but they don't get curious about that customer prospect's bigger world and what matters to them. And when you're not curious in those scenarios, you don't understand how to connect the dots so that you become more valuable in their world. And I think any customer, when they understand the impact, not just like this product will fix this problem, but you get curious into, well, what are the other challenges that you have? And maybe if it fixed this problem, you wouldn't feel so stressed about this thing over there. And that curiosity, I read a statistic that says something like salespeople leave 84% of potential revenue on the table because they don't ask enough questions. And it's something like salespeople will ask 5 questions, but customers need to be asked up to 12 questions before they start to pay attention to what a salesperson has to share. So it's that curiosity gap that has a huge revenue potential. And so I see that as, like, for me, it's one of the most satisfying. I mean, it's not just because you can see a revenue attached to it, but all of a sudden there's this different kind of human connection between salespeople and customers, that they understand that they can be so much more helpful and impactful to people. They get to know their customers very much as people and friends, and it shifts that whole dynamic.
And Carla, one of the things too you've been talking about in the spirit of the human connection is that in this world of AI, in this world of technology, this digital landscape that we're entering, there is some hesitation too in saying, oh, these tools are going to remove these human connections, or it's going to automate certain things that I'm used to doing. But what you've seen in the work that you've been doing is you've seen the potential of this. You've seen this come in and probably remove or automate some of the mundane, and actually giving us probably a little bit more time to ask those 12 questions that we didn't have before. Does that resonate with you? And if so, how do you see that moving into the future then?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, AI and technology is a thing that helps us get more efficient. But I think when we sell ourselves short is when we say that's the only application for it, or that I want to save all the creative things for me and keep AI over here. But AI can actually be an amazing partner in both situations. I think the efficiency ones are obvious, but we don't think about how it can help us be more creative and up-level what we do, because we don't think about it in that context. But if you think about, if you ask AI a question, well, paleontologist, if you're a paleontologist doing your job and you ask AI a question about dinosaurs, AI doesn't just give you information about the Jurassic period. Like, it connects all of these dots that we wouldn't even think to ask, to be curious about, and tell us all sorts of things about modern day birds and climate patterns and extinction cycles and who knows what else. It's kind of that network effect, and brings us back information that all of a sudden, if we think about great ideas being about connecting the dots, it gives us dots to connect in just the exponential scale that helps us shift and look at things from perspectives that never occurred to us.
Wow, absolutely.
And it can be that brainstorm partner that we always wish we had, like on call, that red phone on our desk. AI can be that, like creative and curious red phone on our desk when we need it the most, but we have the least energy.
Yes, we have to lean into it, learn about it, absolutely engage with it, right? Yeah. Take our time to engage with it and see how it resonates. With that said, Carla, I mean, you've been speaking about innovation. I've seen your work progress over the years that we've known each other, of course. But what do you see innovation impacting the work that you're doing today in your business? And how do you see that impacting the impact you want to make over the next 5 years or so in the clients that you get to serve every day?
I think the biggest impact that I see is that with all of the change that we've gone through just in the last 5 years, I mean, a pandemic, a boat went sideways in a canal, that Gen Z entering the job market, they value purpose over profits, like so much is changing. And we have to be able to think in faster, quicker, different ways, in a trained way that we feel competent in. And I think believe that have meaning and impact. And so leaders will say, we don't want everybody to be innovators because that's going to open up this incredible can of worms that we don't want to think about managing. But there's a difference between innovation and innovating and being an innovative thinker. And I think we all want people in our organizations to be innovative thinkers because it's the culmination of all these little bitty friction points throughout an organization that slows everybody down at scale. But if we can teach and empower everybody to be that innovative thinker, to be a little bit more creative with the problems that we solve, then all of a sudden, we have power of being able to move fast in mass that we've never seen before. And I think now more than ever. I mean, every year, for how many years we've said, we're moving faster than ever before, but it's true, and the only way we're gonna be able to deal with that as organizations and even communities and schools and educational systems is to teach people how to be more insightful with what they think.
And I agree with you. I mean, that's what gets me excited today, even for the work that we get to do and with our communities, with our audiences, and in our conferences, and the folks that we get to impact, is seeing that just that little bit of mind to just change a little bit and say wow, I could have a much more meaningful impact in this world that's probably, it might feel that it might be dictating your direction, but you actually do have much more power today than you probably did 5, 10, 15 years ago, because we're engaging in this new digital age that is much more democratized than it was before.
Yeah. And I think I come across people who say, well, we did some digital transformation and we're good now. We're fine. We're okay. And I always say, well, what's that status quo thinking costing you? If you stuck with that way of thinking, what's the actual price tag for it? Because a lot of people don't realize that what they assume is their safest bet is actually their riskiest move. And we find comfort in the comfort zone, but if we don't change the way we think and invite new ways of thinking, that comfort zone becomes a danger zone.
So Carla, if we go back to, again, this rapid pace of change and folks not only feeling left behind, but figuring out what do we get to do, we do acknowledge that we try to create this space for all of us to come together and say, hey, fine, let's go and solve this problem. But even that sometimes doesn't feel like enough. Can you share with us a little bit more? How do you help organizations navigate when we all decide to come together and either brainstorm or try to solve a particular problem, how either they've been responding to this or how you recommend folks to navigate some of these changes?
I think one of the things that I've talked about for a long time is I don't believe brainstorms are effective ways to do our best work. So it comes out in a couple of different scenarios. Maybe we get everybody together in a conference room and we say, we're going to do a brainstorm and there's no such thing as a bad idea. So give us all your ideas. And there's always a person who monopolizes a conversation. You have extroverts, you have introverts. And you spend this whole day and in the back of your mind, my inbox is piling up beyond repair. And you realize you're probably gonna go with, the highest ranking person in the room, their idea anyway, because we all wanna keep our jobs kind of thing. And it's hard to flush things out. And that if you don't go with their idea, you'll probably just rehash something that you've already done. So why put your heart and soul into coming up with something really creative? Or maybe you do an offsite and, it's a beach thing, it's really nice. And so you're with all of these people that you work with and you're gonna do an all-day strategy session the next day and they wanna loosen you up. And so you have the beach day and you're out in the sun in your swimsuit with people that you work with in the sand, in places that aren't comfortable, and then you start having a few drinks and you get incredibly sunburned, and then you have a dinner. And so the next day you show up, you're sunburned, you're surfing the sand in places that isn't comfortable, maybe you're a little hungover, and they're like, give us all your best ideas. Like, that is not a great way to come up with the best ideas. And so I think about, well, when I have done my best work, it's like these certain conditions that seem to happen in a moment. And then I have the spark of brilliance, but I want to be able to recreate that. And sometimes it's when I talk to other people. So I'm like, hey, Eric, do you have a minute? And you're like, you're running out the door. And so I have this list of people I call, but I can't depend on that dynamic either. But what if we can work with AI to be our muse, who is is the red phone on our desk, who we can go to any time of the day, 24 hours a day, all the time, and that can spark that beautiful inquisitiveness and the good parts that can come out of a brainstorm and a trip to the beach without all the damage to us. And I think that's the wonderful part that I think about the muse and the machine. Yes, it's a machine, it's efficient, but it can also be this beautiful muse that we play off each other with to get to these new parts.
And Carla, you bring up an interesting idea that I had never thought about. You're right. Like sometimes we decide to get together. And I'm here probably scheduling a brainstorming session, thinking if I just give them 2 weeks notice, and we'll do it from 9 to 11, and this conference room, everything's going to work out great. But you don't know what happened to them that morning. You don't know what happened to them the week before. Everyone's just coming in probably in a different spirit. They all want to contribute. But the human condition sometimes is just not the most optimal to say, hey, you know what, in the next 120 minutes, we're going to go and solve this problem that's been building up for weeks, of months, or if not years. Mm-hmm. And what you're encouraging us is to just find those moments, right? Find those moments, use AI as a tool, and for that to be that spark, right? So when we do come to these opportunities to engage from a human condition perspective, we are our full selves, right? Going into having those conversations. And I absolutely love that. With that said, though, too, Carla, how do you see AI today then? Right now, this is a great example of how you see it as a tool, but what are your thoughts about where AI is today and where it's going?
I think about this back in terms of our kids wanted a puppy forever. And as parents, and you got 3 kids, like you know who's cleaning up the yard, you know how this scenario is going to go. So you're at all costs, you're not touching the puppy. You're not touching the puppy. And then slowly, maybe a neighbor gets a puppy or you run into somebody with an older dog in the, neighborhood who you see regularly, and you start to have this affection toward it, and you kind of warm up, you see all these possibilities with it. And then so you cave and you get the new puppy. And there's this euphoria, oh, isn't it so cute? Look what it can do. And then it tanks real quick because you're oh my, it peed in the bed, all these things. It's not potty trained. You have to go through all the pain of being able to train the puppy. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and we have a little bell that we got for our dog. And it runs over and it rings that bell to tell us, open the door so I can go outside instead of, making the mess inside. And then, and they come and they snuggle you and you go through this whole emotional roller coaster. AI is kind of that new puppy. At the beginning, we're I don't have anything to do with it. No, I know what it's going to do to my life. And then slowly you get exposure to it. And then you ask it a question and it does one amazing thing and you're enamored with it. And then, oh, holy smokes, that didn't turn out the way. So you have this roller coaster. And so AI can be this new puppy syndrome. And we're always going to have the ups and downs. Our puppy now is 6. And I still have the ups and downs. Luckily, it's fully potty trained, but, still chews things up. It doesn't always follow the training. And I think AI is the same way.
That is a great new way of giving that perspective on that. Yeah, just leaning into something differently. It feels uncomfortable. It absolutely feels uncomfortable. But eventually it just becomes an extension of your experience, right? Of what it is to be a parent or a homeowner or someone that, just to spend a little bit more time with. And that extends our human condition. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily replace it. So,
I think about, I'm a different person now because I have a dog, and I feel more human. There's so many things that I do because I have a dog that I wouldn't do, walk 3 times a day. And I think the same is true of AI. There's so many things that we'll find ourselves doing as humans that make us feel more connected because it's there.
Carla, what a wonderful example for all of us to be considering as we enter this AI era That today it's AI, maybe in the next few years, it's gonna be something else. With that said, we like to do something always really fun with our guests. I always ask them to give me a question, probably from left field that they've been thinking about. Carla, what question do you have for me today?
Well, I did not ask Siri or Alexa or Chat GPT for this. This is a real, true human question. What was the last thing you were curious about?
Ooh, what was the last thing I was curious about? The last thing I was curious about was actually, I'm trying to understand the inequality in education and how that relates to certain neighborhoods and what economy or economic activity we could see through some of these areas that we could easily relate to. What I mean by that is I'm trying to understand, like if I see a payday loan office versus a wealth advisory office, what does that tell me not only about that community, but what could that tell me possibly about that school that's serving in that community? And so I was trying to understand if what a payday loan is today versus a wealth advisor is, what are some other indicators of that, right? And so I've been trying to navigate some of that because I want to have conversations around inequality that are much more than just the statistics. That might sound a little bit heavy, but much more relatable, that if I'm driving around a neighborhood, I could just immediately relate to either that community or see that community a little bit differently and understand what I could do to make it a little bit different.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah,
that's really
and
beautiful.
so,
I love that.
No, I appreciate
Thanks
that
for sharing
question,
that.
Carla.
Yeah.
So with that said, Carla, thank you so much for being on this podcast, but more importantly, how can people connect with you and your work? What are you looking forward to for the rest of the year and the work that you're bringing to everyone around the world?
The best place to connect with me is go to my website. It's Carla with a C, Johnson.co. There's no M. I say it's .co for the great state of Colorado because that's where I live. I live in Denver. And on there, I have a place where you can sign up for my newsletter that comes out every other week.
It's a great newsletter. I'm subscribed to it.
It's called
awesome.
the Rethink Lab, and it teaches people how to consistently rethink, and there's a 7-minute challenge in every one. So in 7 minutes over the next 7 days, you can become a more innovative thinker. Something very, very simple. And the other thing that I invite people to do is I have an innovation archetype assessment. So you can go find out what kind of an innovative thinker that you are. And it's really fascinating what people tell me they learn from themselves from this assessment.
Well, Carla, we're going to have the links for all that in the show notes. And of course, if you have any questions for Carla, please let us know in the comment section. Carla Johnson, thank you so much for being with us today in the Future Human Experience.
Thank you for having me, Eric. This has been a pure joy. Long time watcher, first time interviewer.
Awesome. All right, thank you. Hey everyone, this is Eric, the host of the Future Human Experience. The reason why this podcast was created was to be a platform for others to really bring these conversations to life. So if you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. It will really help our channel and expose these ideas for others. Thank you.